Kitchen. I'm a senior program manager on the Target Accelerators team. Through my work on the Target Takeoff program, I have had the privilege of meeting and working with one of the founders on this panel, but more on that soon. Target Accelerators hosts programs for all types of founders and creators. I encourage everyone to check out targetaccelerators.com for information on our program offerings. I have the privilege of moderating today's panel of FemTech visionaries as part of our Twin Cities Startup Week. While I am nowhere close to being worthy of sharing the stage with these three, I hope the discussion we have today will enlighten and inspire viewers long after Twin Cities Startup Week is over. I'd like to start the discussion today by introducing our panel of speakers and having them tell us a bit about what they're currently working on. Our first panelist is Arafa Raymond, co-founder of Chorus Health. Arfa is an entrepreneur, designer, and product expert with expertise in healthcare, technology, and social innovation across 4 continents. She has designed and launched transformational products that have impacted thousands of people's lives and have been featured by TechCrunch, Apple, Wired, BBC, and Reuters, among others. Arfa, can you tell us a little about what you're working on now?
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. So I'm the founder of Chorus Health, where we're building Tariyal, which is the first data-driven platform for women in perimenopause and menopause. There are 50 million women in the US and 1 billion around the world who are currently navigating menopause with very little resources and support. So Tariyal's mission is to empower every woman on her menopause journey with data-driven recommendations, insights, and a supportive community.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Our next panelist is Reedy Teriel, the CEO and co-founder of NextGen Jane. Reedy is an engineer, scientist, businesswoman, and aspiring writer. She started Jane out of frustration, but has stayed for the rigorous intellectual challenge and the chance to fix something that is broken. Her passions include genomics, women's health, work in emerging markets, and a good Spotify playlist. Reedy, can you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like today?
Yeah, absolutely. So NextGen Jane is a smart tampon company, and I like to put the smart in quotes because the tampon's actually quite dumb. There's no reagents or microcircuitry in it. It's an all organic tampon with smart as our bodies. And what we're really trying to capitalize on is taking your natural biopsy, which what menstruation is. Your menstrual cycle is your endometrial lining thickening and preparing for pregnancy. And if you're not pregnant, it sheds. And so that is a really easy way for us to access a very novel medical substrate. We do genomic sequencing of that novel substrate, of that endometrial lining, to try to find signals that are predictive of reproductive pathologies like endometriosis or uterine fibroids, endometrial cancer, anything you can imagine impacting the uterine lining. My day-to-day is consumed with thinking of ways to utilize that lining and executing on it.
Wow, thank you so much. That is very cool. And our third panelist today is Amy Beckley, CEO and owner of MFB Fertility. Amy has her PhD in pharmacology and expertise in hormone signaling. Her mission is to empower women with vital knowledge that could help in their ability to conceive. She founded MFB Fertility Incorporated and invented the Prove test in her own basement, which now allows women to confirm successful ovulation by tracking progesterone and metabolites in just 5 minutes at home. Amy, can you tell us a little bit about why you started this company and what you're working on now?
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I had a personal battle with infertility, and I realized just how broken it was. And women needed more knowledge so they can have better conversations with their doctor and get treated sooner. So we make at-home testing kits that are FDA cleared so that women can measure their own hormones, get answers, and advocate for better treatments.
That's fantastic. Well, you three, I'm so excited to be talking to you all today. I'm excited for our discussion, and I'll just kick it off right away. This question is for Reedy and Amy. FemTech is a heavily regulated industry. Can you share any advice on how you've prepared for your launches while also being kind of in that approval process or for these clearances and claims?
I'll let you go first.
So We originally thought that our product was a class 1 exempt product. We contacted the FDA and got put into the class 1 bucket, by contacting them. Regulations change, and we were contacted and told that we needed a 510K to get clearance. And so we did that. Regulations are ever changing. Just like, you see with COVID, regulations change. So you just have to be ready to adapt to the situation and make the best product that you can, get it clinically validated, do all the studies you need to do so that when the FDA comes knocking at your door, you're ready. You can just play out your cards and say, yeah, I'm ready, we're good.
That's great. Reedy, what would you say to that question?
I totally agree. I think that the only thing I would add is that you don't want to approach regulatory as an ex post facto thought. You don't want to prepare for launch and, make a product and then say, oh, maybe we should check in with the regulatory bodies. Obviously, if you're either giving clinically relevant information to patients or designing anything that goes into the human body, you want to be working with your regulatory counterparts to understand what are the things that they're going to be looking for. And that sort of makes the process not scary at all. They will tell you exactly what they'll look for, what they'll require, and you can build towards whether it's the clinical studies that you design or there's an entire regulatory dossier that's required if it's a med tech product. You can have that in place in anticipation of submitting it, in tandem or in parallel with your actual product launch.
Awesome. Thank you both. So my next question has to do with FemTech seems to be lagging behind health tech in general. I think a lot of the growth has to do with the destigmatization of women's sexual wellness and women's bodies. Have you experienced this? And Arfa, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the reason I started this company was because women in my life and women I love had really challenging experiences navigating their menopause journey, which for all of us, starts in maybe our early 40s, even as early as late 30s. And that was several years ago, but even in 2020 now, women are having the exact same experience. And my kind of guiding question is, when I go through this in a few years, will anything have changed? Will there be less stigma about this? Will we be talking more about this? And at the rate of current innovation, I felt like the answer was no. There was just not enough being done. There were not even enough conversations being had about this issue. So I feel like finally now with solutions like ours and a couple of others, we're finally even starting to acknowledge that women go through menopause, and it's an extremely challenging experience, and it affects our careers, it affects our personal lives, our relationships, and none of that can really start, and innovation can't really start until we acknowledge that not only is this something that is real, but it's also normal. We all go through it, and unless we can start having more open conversations about it, we hurt women, we hurt women's health, and we hurt, everything else. I mean, this is something that has an effect on the entire healthcare system. It has an effect on the economy. Women are, working women even in menopause, and it has an effect on our productivity, our ability to work. So I felt that the stigma around this issue for so long has actually been hurting our entire society. And I think until that starts changing, we will continue to do that. So I've definitely felt in my line of work that stigmas have held back innovation, but hopefully, that's one of our main aims around this, is to start to erase that and have more awareness and conversations about it.
Excellent. I like to hear that, and couldn't be more true. Thank you for saying that. Amy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's a tough industry to be in, because if you think about, you went to the store and you had the best tasting protein bar, you're going to go tell people. It's going to be like, oh my God, this protein bar is so awesome. But if you're talking about a menopause product or a fertility product or a tampon, like, you're not going to be like, hey, Facebook world, I just had the best experience with this menstrual cup. Like, you're just not going to, because people don't like to talk about it. And so coming into this industry is really difficult, because you have to reach people organically. You don't have very much word of mouth. So, if we could change that, that'd be great. It's just, not something that people enjoy talking about.
Definitely. Reedy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I like to encapsulate what the experience has been like with three stories. In my line of work, that there's three actors that are there are many actors that are important, but three that are super important are investors, scientists, and clinicians. They're really important in the ecosystem to fund and prescribe and adapt and work on these problems. And I like to tell three stories that sort of indicate where the landscape was a few years ago, and I happily admit that it's changing and evolving, and it's gratifying to see. But when we first started down this journey, there was an investor who couldn't say period. He said that time of the month when the woman does what she does, which is it's really hard to describe and pitch something when you can't even name it. And that was from the investment side. And we actually talked about this idea to quite a few scientists as well. And I remember we once landed on a team that happened to be all female scientists. So we thought, oh, this is awesome. Like, they're going to understand the experience and it's going to be a different type of conversation, which for the most part it was. But at the end of that conversation, they wanted to give me some advice. And they said, just between us, we like what you're doing, but you should not do it with a form factor of a tampon because no lab in America will work with menstrual blood. And so, that was interesting coming from, again, scientists who were female. And I remember one time I was having a conversation with a doctor who was a oncologist, really great oncologist, working on ovarian cancer. And as you guys may know, ovarian cancer is really difficult to diagnose, usually presents in stage 3 and stage 4. And so the prognosis, even in the United States, is not great. So the 5-year survival rate, I think, for ovarian cancer in the US is 44%. So you are more than likely to pass away if you have that diagnosis within 5 years. And so he was excited about the prospect of getting access to ovarian and fallopian tube cells through the tampon. And he said something. He said, this is really interesting, Reedy. You will take the tampon that a woman puts in at the beginning of her period and takes out at the end of her period, and you're going to examine that. And it was a moment where I thought, my God, this is even an advocate. And he believes that we wear one tampon for 5 to 7 days. And so there's this range of stigma. It's just lack of knowledge, I think, that has hampered the advancement of technology in this area.
That's kind of painful to hear some of those stories, but yeah, very true. And I guess moving even more from what you talked about with investors, do you feel like you need to pitch to particular investors, women investors, in order to receive money, or are you comfortable asking this money from anyone? And Reedy, you talked about one of those instances, but I'm sure you all have them. How do you think about fundraising and potential partners that you're taking on?
I can start by answering. Feel free to jump in. Yeah, I mean, most of our investors happen to be women, although that was not intentional. We really pitched, unilaterally to all types of investors, but it's, expected, I guess, that most people really didn't understand what we were doing. They don't really understand the problem. I mean, I heard constantly people downplaying just how important this problem is, even telling me straight up, I don't think this is a serious enough problem, when I'm literally telling them like the pain women are in, just how enormous the need is here. And I think what I've come to realize is I don't think I'm going to, solve that problem on my own. It's a societal change that needs to happen. So I mean, pain bias in healthcare is very well documented and it's very real. Even our own doctors don't fully believe us sometimes when we tell them about our pain, about our problems. We're constantly, told and dismissed about real problems we're experiencing. So how can I expect investors to change overnight when our healthcare system is not, there yet? So I've really just resorted to making a business case for it. I kind of changed my tactic around, I thought people would empathize if I told them stories, if I told them, data around the pain point, but it just started becoming more of a case for, listen, this is an enormous market opportunity. And if you're not, going to invest, you're just hurting yourself, because you're really missing out. And I think the burden of educating people about women's health and our problems honestly shouldn't just reside with women. I think parallels can be drawn to the fight for racial justice. I don't think that falls entirely on people of color. I think other people who are not part of that group have to educate themselves, and the system has to be changed, and the burden just doesn't have to fall on women to be, educating people about some really basic things, which I think they should already be educated about.
That's fantastic. Reedy, Amy, do you have anything to add?
I think that, all pitching, all selling even is an empathetic act, right? You try to connect with the person across the table with you and get them to be in your seat and see the value of what you're pitching. And so I think that there is a inherent advantage that or disadvantage that people who are pitching products that are designed for women have, because 95% of the people across the table are going to be male, right? And generally older men. And so I think that that is just a structural challenge. Like you can imagine coming in and pitching something that they immediately see the need for because it's a need in their everyday life. I always laugh to think about like how people in the Valley, when they first heard about Uber, must have been so excited because it was so hard to get from the South Bay to San Francisco. They're like, this is a product I need in my life. They felt it viscerally, right? And so how do you get someone to feel viscerally the problem of menopause or the problem of deep menstrual pain or deep infertility? And I think that's what actually, I don't know, I'm interested to see if Amy's experience was slightly different. I do feel like fertility startups took off faster than other areas in femtech because these partners work, their fertility is often a joint problem, that both partners go through that pain. And so I felt like that there was more of an empathetic bridge to build. But to Arfa's point, not only is it that men carry the equal burden of understanding these problems, it's that men are overwhelmingly in positions of power and have their fingertips at capital. And so they're going to have to be the ones that we connect with to loosen that capital to go towards women's issues until we get to a point where there is equitable representation of females in, venture capital firms and Congress and CEO, everywhere in society that you can imagine.
Yeah, so we approached many investors and we started off trying to explain the science to them and how we are different, how we measure a completely different hormone. We fit in a different spot. And women, men, all of them, I don't understand how you're different, because they're used to seeing the same pregnancy test in a different box, a different handle, a different whatever it is. And they couldn't understand that we had a whole new section of the world we were looking at. And so we would just beat ourselves, just, oh my gosh, why aren't you understanding this? Why aren't you understanding this? And so we bootstrapped for a long time because investors just didn't get it. And then we started pitching it a different way as like, look at the sales, look at the success stories, look at these metrics, look where we're selling now. Like, we just got this contract with the US government, like, look at all this traction. And then it came so attractive to men, women, didn't matter, because they now had something like, oh my gosh, this is something totally new. Like they're selling it, they're proving themselves. So for us, we had to show that our product was in market and selling and being adopted before investors would come in and say, okay, now I understand that you're on something. I like to say that investors, if you can pitch a story that investors want to talk about on the golf course, you got a winner, right? So think about Tesla. They're like, oh my God, I invented in this car that like drives itself. How cool is that? Right? All their buddies on the golf course be like, yeah, I'm in, sign me up. And so you need to pitch it in a way that it sounds so cool to buddies on the golf course, being like, oh my gosh, how could I not be involved in something so amazing as this? And that's what we had to do.
Yeah, if I can just add, I'm really glad you spoke about this, Amy, because I think there's just so much difference between, pitching and investing and fundraising for this issue versus really everything else. You know, I have friends who are, or I know founders who, you know, were able to get checks before they even knew what they were doing. And you hear these stories a lot, like you were able to raise off of an idea, you were able to raise off of a pitch deck with 5 slides. I've heard this a lot, and I can just tell you that was not the case for us at all. And I had a similar experience to you, that the bar is so much higher for people to convert to becoming an investor. It really had to be about proving, you know, having a full product built out in the market, showing traction, showing metrics. In many cases, even that wasn't enough, but, you know, that had to be essential for us to, you know, get any investor interested. And I think that would be, if I were to do it again, or if I was advising someone else who's struggling in trying to innovate in this area, which is very much needed, I would say that as well, is kind of when preparing for fundraising, just know that your experience might be different from some other founders who are innovating in different areas, where, exactly like you said, people just get it. They feel the problem, they can kind of get it, and even if they don't know if it's going to work, they care about it enough that they'll put they'll put some money into it. Unfortunately, that's not always the case with the very real problems that women struggle with, the challenges in women's health. So I think, you know, really proving yourself and your business case was really important for us, just like you.
That's great to hear. This is excellent insight. Thank you, you three. My next question is around this current global pandemic. Have your businesses been affected at all, and how are you reacting to these unprecedented times? I'll start with you, Reedy.
Yeah, I think that there's a short-term and a long-term effect for us. The short-term was that obviously we had to go into shutdown for 2 months and then come up with a staggered schedule of people coming in and working in ways that were as safe as possible, but allowed us to continue to do lab work. There was a lot of stuff that in the initial 2 months when we were completely work from home, you know, you catch up on administrative stuff, you catch up on grant writing, and, you know, anything that you could do from a computer, but you sort of reach a saturation point where you have to get back in the lab. And so we were able to do that successfully to get back. And the sort of short-term thing that we noticed right away was in a global pandemic, one of the things that happens in a hospital system, as it should, is all the attention went to triaging and taking care of the burning problem at hand. And there wasn't much time left over to do clinical studies. And so for us, you know, sample throughput is sort of a lifeblood of a startup that's doing biotech work. And so we definitely had to be creative in thinking about how to work around that. But in the end, I think that the long-term consequences of that are going to be substantial and in the net positive direction. And what I mean by that is, I think there was a lot of lip service given to telemedicine for years, and then suddenly it just happened. Like overnight, everyone's doing it. And so doing it as, and they've accepted it, right? If you can imagine, it's so hard to change a system that's entrenched, and there's a global event and it becomes completely, you know, customary to have your first doctor's meeting be a video chat. Or even when we talked previously to clinics and clinicians about sending an at-home kit that would then be mailed back to our labs, you know, it was a new paradigm for them. They were sort of uncomfortable with it. It's a new sample type. How's this working? And again, overnight, it's obviously clear that we're moving to a place where the brick and mortar clinical collection is going to be decoupled from diagnostics, and that is a good direction for it to go. And so conversations and the dialogue right now with clinicians is actually different. They are more accepting and amenable to saying, oh, okay, fine, this whole sample collection thing happens at home. Cool, great. We can actually keep moving and making sure that preventative care happens by working into these new methods. So long term, we actually think there are some positive impacts structurally that will enable anyone who's doing or trying to do at-home diagnostics to function a little bit more easily.
Nice. Amy, what would you say has been the biggest impact to MFB Improve?
Yeah, you know, like everything else, fertility treatments shut down, IVF clinics were closed, and we had the fortunate ability that we were an in-home diagnostic. All of our testing happens at home, not at a clinic. And so we had a conversation and we're like, you know what, we're going to do our part. We can't make masks, we can't make PPE, but we can make our product cheaper. And so we went out and said, you know, anybody who's struggling, we want you to have the diagnostics that available to you at home while you're, you know, at home. And, you know, we just embraced and supported the community, and more people are turning to in-home diagnostics and don't want to go to the clinic, don't want to go to get a blood draw. And so we're filling this gap with, you know, a urine-based test that they can do at home and then communicate back to their doctors, and they can get remotely monitored. So, you know, COVID changed how we think about fertility treatments, and we are doing our part to make that as easy as possible for women, because it's just not a good situation. And, you know, our little company, that's what we can do to chip in.
That's fantastic, and that's huge for so many people. Kudos to you guys. Arfa, how about you guys? How has COVID affected your business?
Yeah, we are a digital platform, so I didn't share some of the really tough challenges, which I think my peers here did, and I can, you know, totally, you know, sympathize with what a difficult time this has been. We are a small team, so we have we've stayed remote. But I think what we've really done or were able to do during the pandemic was use it as almost an inspiration to innovate on our own product and our platform. It was very clear when the pandemic started that, you know, it was having an enormous impact on women, on everyone, but, you know, women are primary caretakers. They were working at the same time, starting to like homeschool young kids. And that is exactly our target demographic, you know, women in midlife and 40s. So we just started seeing a lot more data and sentiments on our platform about needing more support. So we actually around June or July launched a totally new feature, which is a community where women can interact with each other, which is something we had on the roadmap for a long time from now. But we accelerated that because we just felt the need to, we just felt the need in our community. So we were able to accelerate that, launch it, and it's really been, I think, really transformative for our platform, and is adding a lot of support and value to our users who are already, you know, struggling with these health conditions that are really hard to solve. They don't get a lot of support from doctors and workplaces for this issue. So in the meantime, I think what is really valuable for women is connecting with each other for advice, for support. So I'm really, you know, excited and glad that we've been able to take this opportunity to do that.
What an incredible way to engage with your customer during such a difficult time in people's lives. Reedy and Amy, how are you guys engaging with your customers on a daily basis? Where are you meeting them, and what do they have to say?
Yeah, we're very hands-on with our consumers. We have a private Facebook group that we allow women to interact, ask questions, and that's grown. It's doubled its size since COVID, hands down. Wow. But yeah, providing that safe space, that very supportive, open community has been amazing.
That's incredible.
You know, prior to COVID, one of the ways we loved communicating with our base was actually having what we called tea parties, where we would just gather friends and their friends and talk to them about what their issues were, what they were concerned with, what are the things that they want to see in the world that they don't, and if there was any way that we could work on providing that. And you know, they were loosely for market research to try to understand from the base what they were lacking in their lives, but it ended up being an opportunity to actually talk about certain conditions that we were facing internally, like whoever happened to be at that particular meetup. And it was really empowering to see how vocalizing what you were going through gave others the opportunity to step up and talk about what they were going through. And so they ended up being really energizing sessions where people both learned about what, what conditions were out there, as well as got voice and were able to articulate some of the issues to their doctor, for example, in ways that they hadn't been able to before. And so we were trying to capture some of that in COVID to say, how can we maintain some of it at least until we are in a position to be in person again and to break bread with each other and break bread with our community. And one of the ways we found that is we actually launched a survey in order to, both ask questions of our consumer base, but even more than that, which is to teach our consumer base. And so it's a really interactive, fun way to learn about your reproductive health. And it has all these hyperlinks that take you to like fundamental research that teaches you about it. And it's sort of in line with something that we believe that I sense that my colleagues on this panel do too, which is that it's incumbent upon us as we bring products to the market to also bring data literacy. Which will allow people to understand what the data that they're getting and how to interpret it and how to contextualize it and figure out how it's relevant in their lives. And so this has been a way, this online survey has been a way for us to continue to have that bond, even if it's not in person.
Wow, very cool. I would add that maybe as part of that data literacy, some Zoom backgrounds that are as quality as Amy's would be helpful, I think, for some folks.
Absolutely.
So my next question is kind of around the innovation that you're seeing in the FemTech space. This space is brimming with innovation. I've enjoyed kind of the adventure wear and then the eco wear where it comes to period cups, reusable charcoal pads. It's really exciting to me. What types of technology are each of you excited about seeing in this space, or what makes you excited to be playing in the same space where so much is coming up? Arfa, can I start with you?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of really interesting things going on here, like you mentioned. I'm personally a big champion of kind of expanding the definition of women's health. We think about it a lot from the angles where we've seen a lot of investment, like fertility, menstrual health, which I think is fantastic. We need even a lot more there. But I think I really want to bring to light some innovation being done outside of that, because women's health is more than just our, periods and uteri. Women have worse health outcomes on almost every major chronic health disease, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, bone health issues. Like all of these issues are women's health issues as well. So I'm really excited about, companies and technology like NeuroTrack. I think they're doing really interesting, exciting work on early diagnosis and treatment of Alzheimer's disease, which, they're not a femtech quote unquote company, but I think they're solving a huge problem which disproportionately affects women. And I think other areas similar to this, cancer, even menopause, post-reproductive health is what really excites me at the moment.
So, Reedy, do you have anything to add that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, so I will also say that I think that there's a lot of innovation to happen in fertility, and that's great, but I do think that there is an overemphasis on it in the femtech area. And part of what I think part of what bothers me about it is it reduces women down to their reproductive potential when their lives are long and there's many problems. So I do love all the menopause startups. I think that's an area that needs more and more funding. And I actually love the new sex tech innovations that are coming out, because they are, again, affirming that there is value to female pleasure outside of reproductive potential, which is great. And the only thing that I would add is that I feel like there's not enough money in menstrual health. And I say that because there's tons of money going to like period products and like different organic tampons and whatnot, but not to actual hard science in menstrual health. To actually seeing if you can pick up, inflammatory markers that can tell you what the exact etiology of a particular reproductive pathology is. Where's the money there? So there is a lot of money going to like innovations that don't require a 10-year life cycle and $1 billion in to really change it. People are funding what's within their fund window where they can get a return, 3 to 4 years, X amount of million in, right? So I would still advocate for like some heavy dollars going into menstrual research that from a science lens.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I'm going to add people invest in what they know. So everybody knows what a tampon is. Everybody knows what the pad is. Oh, you made it last longer, or you made it organic, or you made it reusable. Great, awesome. That's like an incremental thing where people can say, I know what that is. Let me put money in it because we already know the market. We know people using this. Let's just, tweak it a little bit. And fertility's gotten that too. I mean, not even kidding. There's like 50 different companies that are making an ovulation test. A technology that's been there for 30 years, and they're getting millions and millions of dollars for literally recreating something that is old tech. It's like fancier, it's a better box, it's a reader, it gives you a number instead of 2 lines, like whatever it is. And it's almost really annoying to be honest, because it's like the investors put the money into it because they know the market. They're like, oh, you're just making a better mousetrap. We need to focus on truly innovative, truly new, novel things. And that comes from us women actually buying the products and actually using them. Because if we can't show investors the market and the stakeholders the market, that people are actually going to buy this, we're sunk, we're done. And so, I would encourage whoever's watching this to look at these innovative things, go buy, the menstrual cup, and, come out of the box, because, step away from what you think is safe and secure. And it's scary. It's scary. I mean, the first time you do something, whether it's, taking your kids to a new school or trying a tampon for the first time. I think we can all remember that. Like, I didn't know that was an angle. I thought it was straight up and down. Okay, it's not straight up and down. But it's like the first time is kind of scary, but we have to step out of our own comfort zone and do something new. Otherwise, we're not going to move forward.
Speaking of that, I think the 3 of you are very versed in this space, but what advice would you give to these viewers of this session, everybody, on how to overcome or recognize when someone's uncomfortable with a topic to help educate and inform them? I'm thinking that this is especially important now as us humans, we're learning about having these difficult conversations around racial equity work and what needs to be done. What advice would you give when you're approaching these difficult conversations?
You got to own it. You got to go on all your Zoom meetings with a uterus behind you. That's just what you got to do. You got to step out and be like, look, I know this is an issue. I am the expert and I'm going to convince you. I mean, we're all doing this because we're very, very passionate about this. It is very, very difficult. I will not lie. Like, I cry probably 3 times a week because it's so hard, but it's worth it. It 100% is worth it. And we have to have that passion. We have to have that drive, and you just got to own it. I mean, if you can't believe in yourself, how are you going to convince somebody else?
Thank you, Amy. That's great to hear. Reedy, what would you say?
I mean, specifically in terms of how do you have these difficult conversations? I mean, obviously I'm talking about menstrual blood to predominantly older white men. I think that in the end of the day, no matter how much discomfort I think I'm facing in having that conversation with somebody who, doesn't want to have it ostensibly and, does things like avoiding, I go into pitches with my co-founder who's male, and sometimes they ask him tampon questions. I think they're more comfortable making eye contact with him. And so it's really, I choose to interpret that as hilarious and an opportunity to re-engage and say, actually, I can answer that question for you. But no discomfort that I go through in having that conversation compares, even 1/1000 to the discomfort that so many female-born individuals go through when they have endometriosis, right? Like the type of pain they go through every month is like infinitely more than any sort of pain that I think I'm going through in interacting with this investor. And so I use that as an analog to say, that's cool. You can make me feel some discomfort. It's nothing compared to what I'm trying to resolve right now for a much more important subject.
Well, that's huge. Arfa, anything to add?
Yeah, everything both of you said really, really resonates. This has been a really challenging journey, and I'm still early in my journey and I'm already exhausted. So I feel you, Amy. about the kind of the weekly toll this takes. But it's, yeah, I totally agree about being purpose driven. I totally agree about, you know, having your eye on the larger problem here. I relate to that in that, you know, I'm constantly on our platform and through even emails getting, you know, messages from our users, customers about what just the challenges they're facing, how much we're helping, and that really keeps me going personally. And then the third tip I would give, which is a bit more tactical, is probably just try to speak people's language. I think, you know, when it comes to investors, this is what I mentioned earlier, I've tried to do is, okay, I get it, you don't give a shit about women and our problems, but, you know, here's the data. I know you like data. Here's the data on market size, on how much this is growing, how much money there is in this problem. And then maybe you can, you know, kind of skip over that hurdle where you have to talk about uncomfortable topics in the beginning. But I think that has kind of been a strategy for me, is to really change the topic then about what this actually is. In every case, it's a business opportunity. This is a big business. Women's health, let's say you don't care about it, it's good business. So I would advise people to put away their biases and start building really massive companies in the space.
Wow, 3 excellent points of feedback and advice. I love it. Thank you guys. As we're winding down the conversation, I'd love to just hear, what does the next 5 years look like for each of you and your businesses? You know, what's on the plan? I know we talked about what had to be moved forward due to COVID, but what's on the plan that you can tell us about? What are you excited about? And Arfa, I'd love to start with you.
Sure, yeah. So I think the vision for us is to really, we say we want to advance women's post-reproductive health. And we're beginning with solving a really big problem in perimenopause, but we think this can really extend to all women's health issues after, you know, after we've had babies. And that's an enormous, enormous space. But I think what some milestones we're working towards is building the largest data set in history on women's midlife health, which I hope will totally transform research and innovation on this issue, enabling precision medicine for menopause for the first time ever, so we can connect women to the right treatments for them much faster. Right now, women spend years trying to find solutions, but can't. And then really changing the narrative and conversation about this. And I think, you know, I'm excited, humbled to be in the company of amazing innovators like this. And I think this is a collective effort, is to really, you know, do really amazing things in this space. So we just start talking and looking at women's health totally differently.
That's great. Reedy, how about you? What's next, the next 5 years looking like?
I mean, so, you know, when we started down this journey, there was these 2 big giant problems we noticed. One was that take endometriosis as a single reproductive disease. The only way to get a diagnosis was to have a surgeon go in and, you know, do a laparoscopy, meaning they put in endoscopes and they try to visually identify ectopic tissue, meaning endometrial lining where it doesn't belong. And that was, if you think about it, inherently subjective. It's dependent on how good the surgeon is in visually finding and identifying tissue where it doesn't belong. And that was one part of the problem. And the second part of the problem was that women themselves didn't know when they were experiencing something that was abnormal. And we would talk to people who changed their menstrual cups 5 to 6 times a day, meaning they were losing like 80 to 100 mils of blood in a day, and didn't know that that was a problem. You know, they're like, where is it written that you're supposed to change your menstrual cup X number of times? And if you change more than that, that should be a warning sign. Who tells you that? Who teaches you that? And in both of those instances, there was a single thread, which is there's something subjective happening, right? And so Next-Gen Jane, by whatever tools possible, wants to make a subjective phenomenon objective so that people can find solutions faster. And that's what I hope to see in the next 5 years.
Fantastic. Amy?
Oh yeah, I agree. Solutions faster, but a different topic. So back on fertility, we're stepping out of the when should I have intercourse, when am I fertile window, and stepping into what happens if I'm not ovulating properly. What happens if I have infertility? And for us, we don't think it's fair that it's right for a woman to have to wait 12 months or 3 miscarriages to go seek a professional and get treatment. And so in the next 5 years, we want to complete the treatment loop. We want to provide both, the diagnostic side, so you could detect hormone imbalances, and as well as resources to help you balance and talk to physicians and really get the treatment you need, whether you've been trying 1 month, 12 months, 0 losses, 7 losses, like in my case. It doesn't matter. We'll take everyone and we will treat everyone.
Great, thank you. And just to wrap up, can each of you tell the viewers where to find your brand, where to find you, and how to get a hold of you? Amy?
I feel like this is a plug for Target. So we had the extreme pleasure of going through Anne's accelerator through Target Takeoff. We took our e-com brand and transformed it into a retail-facing product. It was one of my favorite 2 months in my entire life, I'm not gonna lie. And now we're available at Target, which is amazing. We're also available at Amazon and our website, provetest.com. We sell hormone test kits like this, super easy. Very easy to contact us. If you have any fertility issues, please, please, please reach out, even if they're not, progesterone related. We're happy to help you.
Great. And Reedy?
So we are still in R&D, and biotech company will be in R&D for a minute, but what you can do to help us is be part of the change by being part of our clinical research that can massively transform women's health so much faster. And if you're interested in doing that, survey.nextgenjane.com. Come join us.
Survey.nextgenjane.com. Sounds good. And Arfa?
Yeah, so we are available for free on the App Store. Look up Caria, C-A-R-I-A, or you can go to our website, hellocaria.com. If you are in perimenopause, postmenopause, approaching perimenopause, know someone who's going through menopause, will go through menopause, this will help you out a lot. So we hope to see you there.
Caria app. Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies. This has been fantastic. I've learned a lot. I'm sure our viewers have as well. For the audience, if you are interested in participating in our Q&A session, you can join us immediately after this in the community lounge. Thank you so much, everybody.